This video is brought to you by my patrons, the person who sent me this video, and feminism? Hello, and welcome to, or back to, my channel. I'm Kit, and a couple months ago, someone sent this video to me along with the note, creator comments on how she became disaffected with feminism. Could illustrate a bridging of the gap between feminist and traditional mindsets. Now, though this creator, of course, has thousands more subscribers than me, they're still fairly small, so I won't be mentioning the name of the channel or showing the creator's face. We'll start with the originally suggested video and then move into the issue with modern women, because of course I couldn't just watch the one video.
I look at feminism as a failed social experiment, and I've made videos that address issues surrounding feminism. But in the past, I used to be the biggest feminist you could ever meet.
There are different kinds of feminism, radical, socialist, liberal, Marxist, the list goes on, but I've never come across varying levels of feminism. You could say there's a difference between saying, I'm a feminist, low effort, versus joining a group, medium effort, versus creating a group, protesting, things like that, high effort. But funnily enough, when an anti-feminist woman says she was once a radical feminist, or in this case, the biggest feminist, before seeing the light and becoming feminine, they never talk about how they fought for change based on radical feminist principles, joined any groups, they never tell us what they read. They were always just a horrible person who, either actually or retroactively, used feminism as a guise to be a horrible person. Case in point.
My husband and I began having long, drawn-out fights that were sometimes very intense. Most of our fights had to do with my husband not following my orders. I was stubborn and I had a strong will. I believed that it was my duty to lead him in the relationship. I believed that it was my job to hold him accountable for his actions and to punish him in some way whenever he disobeyed my wishes. I was always leading the attack, trying to get him on the defensive. I would nag him in an effort to get him to relent out of sheer annoyance. All of these things made my husband feel emasculated, but I didn't understand that at the time. I saw members of his family as my enemies, and I told him that he had to choose me over them. I didn't think this was an unreasonable request, but he felt like he couldn't make that choice, and that he shouldn't have to.
In a twist I'm sure no one saw coming, feminism doesn't advocate for anyone leading a marriage, nor does it advocate for cutting people off from their family members. But as it turns out, it wasn't feminism that was the problem.
My resentment for my husband was partially fueled by a mental illness that I didn't know I had, which caused me to see him as my enemy and another source of male oppression. Over time, my husband and I became more and more estranged until we eventually separated. In 2020, I was diagnosed with a severe case of bipolar disorder, and I reunited with my husband, but I still didn't know how to be a good wife. It took 3 years for the doctors to finally prescribe me an effective combination of medications, and then the fog was lifted from my mind, and I achieved an acute sense of clarity.
I'm glad she got the treatment she needed, but I'm really struggling to see where bridging the gap between feminist and traditional mindsets comes in. I'm also really curious about who she married, because it doesn't sound like she married a feminist man, but instead one with a traditional leaning mindset, which is why she needed to learn about gender roles, because instead of working together to come up with a way to make life work for them, they instead decided to go with tradition.
I discovered a book called Worthy Woman, written by a man named Zach Rohde. Zach Rohde is a relationship coach who has written several books on how both men and women can change their behavior in order to mend and form lasting, committed relationships. The content of his books may be considered controversial because it defies the feminist ideology that we've been indoctrinated into following. The word submissive is frequently used in Worthy Woman and has the potential to trigger feminists. At the time I read the book, I was already partially disillusioned with feminism, and I was open to new ideas. I knew I wanted to save my marriage. My husband and I both read the book, and together we decided to give his methods a try. Without going into too much detail about the book, it basically educates people about traditional gender roles.
Granted, figuring things out yourself takes more time and effort than reading a book about gender roles, but still, if she held her feminist beliefs so stringently, How did she end up deciding submission was the way to go? And as I've noted before, yes, if you insist one person in the marriage is to submit, things will go a lot smoother because you're not discussing, or arguing, over things anymore, as one person makes all the decisions and the other is to submit. That doesn't make your marriage better, it just means you put a band-aid on it.
Submission is a tool that women can use to empower their men to effectively take leadership in a way that meets their needs. Submission is not synonymous with servitude, as I had previously thought. The book teaches women how to express themselves in feminine ways, such that the men they are with will be motivated to make them happy.
It's funny. Influencers, content creators, authors, they always say submission isn't servitude, but then you read the books or listen to the podcasts by women who were living the submissive wife life, and it looks like submission in practice is actually pretty similar to servitude. Anyway.
I came to find that being the leader doesn't make me happy. I don't like ordering people around, nor do I like the responsibility of making all major decisions.
Anti-feminists always give themselves away. They can't imagine life without hierarchy. Someone has to be the leader. The idea of being a team, of talking things out, of compromise, apparently just doesn't register. And their idea of a leader is always authoritarian in nature. A leader is supposed to inspire people, not just tell them what to do and when. Someone who just tells people what to do is actually a bad leader. Anyway, moving on, she's thankful she gets to be a Sam because that's not a possibility for many women, which, of course...
But this isn't a possibility for many women. I don't know how to fix that. But I do know that feminism has led to dual-income households being the standard for most people because it caused women to flood the workforce in equal numbers as men. This has resulted in women being in a situation where they simply can't spend their time and their lives raising their own children because they're socially required to pursue careers.
We aren't socially required to pursue careers. We are required by capitalism to work for pay, otherwise we'll have nothing. No food, no shelter. And no, feminism isn't the reason dual-income households are the norm now. Women have always worked, they didn't suddenly flood the job market in the 1970s. And a lot of things have contributed to wage stagnation, including declining worker power, rising health insurance costs, globalization, technological advancements, and, of course, corporate greed. CEO pay has risen 1,085% since 1978 in comparison to the average workers' increase of 24%. Anyway, now that she's awake to the lie of feminism, fun fact, that's not where her channel started with, but she did get a lot more views after the change in content, this creator has decided to dedicate her channel to, quote, break down the core doctrine of feminism by exposing the lies one by one. And she very nicely tells us what feminism can be.
Feminism has always promoted itself as being a movement that exists for the benefit and advancement of women. Some people consider it to be a movement towards equality of the sexes. Some people consider it to be a movement that wants to place women in a privileged position in relation to men. Whatever the case may be, the consequences of this social experiment have revealed that it does not benefit women. In fact, it actively works against the interests of women in several ways.
Feminism is, quote, the belief in full social, economic, and political equality for women. But there are those who try to use it as a female supremacist movement, which I, and most feminists, don't support. And it's really interesting how weird people get about feminism. This creator doesn't say anything about who she read or the mistakes feminism led her to making, which is a shame because I'm genuinely curious, and as she wishes to help other people avoid making the same mistakes by warning them off feminism before it's too late, having an example might help, but she doesn't owe us more information than she's comfortable sharing. Anyway, she apparently became a feminist because she was envious of men, she was a tomboy and couldn't imagine growing up into an attractive woman, and she didn't like the idea of male attention, and she associated being feminine with, quote, stupidity, crying, complaining, shopping, and fragility. Her mother and sisters were also feminists, and though she was raised by her father, she saw them enough to, quote, absorb the indoctrination. Honestly, she sounds a lot like me. Though growing up, I only had a vague notion that feminism was about hating men, and I did the I'm not a feminist, but of course I believe in equality dance until my late 20s. Of course, instead of assuming I knew everything about feminism without actually looking into what it is, I instead read books and sought feminist publications. But then,
I think feminism appeals to women who are intelligent, and this is one reason why it is so insidious.
Why, thank you. I am very intelligent. Anyway, I'm not really sure what's insidious about feminism. It's also about confronting your own biases and how you view the world. It's not a women are so great, women never do anything wrong thing. And if you find yourself in a space that's all praise and no critique or discussion, well, that's a red flag, whether it's politics, religion, whatever. Though on that note, again, feminism isn't a religion.
And at some point I realized that my brain had been hijacked. I felt betrayed because I had given my faith to feminism, only to realize that it had led me to make terrible choices that I would later regret.
You don't put your faith in feminism. No feminist thinks the same. There is no grand leader we all look to for pronouncements of how to feminist. And what's really weird to me is all the comments on this video congratulating her on being the rare woman taking accountability. And can someone please explain to me how blaming a social movement for your apparently bad decisions is taking accountability? That was pretty much it for the video that was sent to me. Like the glutton for punishment that I am, I watched a few more, and I truly found a goldmine. In the next video, she opens by saying she just finished Why Women Deserve Less by Myron Gaines, the fit of Fresh and Fit, and she actually took it seriously. Her conclusion was that we need to listen more to the feelings of young men who are in the red pill community or who feel excluded and alienated by a society that doesn't value them. I would say we also need to make mental health services more accessible and socially acceptable, but anyway, I find it interesting that she notes there's nuance in the gender war, but this whole video is just women bad. Nuance where? Anyway, I know my audience is mostly female, but any men out there, would you care to verify this for me?
There are beauty standards that dictate every physical feature of a woman's body, but there are no inner beauty standards for women. A cruel, vindictive, and spiteful woman is just as desirable as a woman who is caring, honest, and sincere, as long as they both meet the same outward beauty standards. A woman is a 10 based on how her body looks, not because of the content of her character.
I must have more faith in men than she does, because I'm pretty sure most men would prefer a kind woman than a vindictive one, even if the latter was more attractive. But on the bright side, she has no faith in women either.
Therefore, there is no incentive for women to be good people.
There's no incentive for anyone to be a good person. You should just try to be a good person because it's the right thing to do. This woman says she's not a misogynist, but I'm having a hard time seeing how she's not. Eleanor, that is not appropriate. Don't blink slowly at me. Yeah, you watch your foot. It's fine. We'll put something over you.
There are men who have been treated badly, who have been used up by the women in their life, and who have practically no success with relationships at all. A lot of these men fear women. They fear rejection. They fear being accused of doing something egregious unintentionally. In today's cancel culture, when women have more power than ever, simply having the wrong opinion can result in a man's banishment from online communities and dating apps. The result is that there are entire subcultures of young men who are very lonely and isolated. Something like 1/3 of men ages 18 to 24 have not had sex in the past year, and there's no denying that it's taking a toll on their mental health. And so I asked the question, what is wrong with modern women?
My mind is just blown that someone can say all that and then ask themselves, what's wrong with modern women? Women can't fix men, and relying on outside validation for happiness and fulfillment is a bad idea regardless of your sex. She goes on to talk about beauty standards, sexual dimorphism, status, and I can't help but think she's a female equivalent of Jordan Peterson. She sounds confident, but when you think about what she's saying, it falls apart. And at this point, I think she's just not a good person.
The abolishment of legal abortion is one way in which our society can restore consequences for sexual behavior. It may be acceptable and normalized now for young women to have premarital and promiscuous sex, but that will change if abortions are no longer an option. It will be a difficult adjustment at first. Men will probably ignore the reality that sex can result in a baby, but once young women begin to experience the consequence of pregnancy and childbirth that naturally accompany sex, that standard will quickly change. It will become less acceptable. Women will start being more careful of their actions, which will make them more mature and less insufferable.
Women are insufferable because of abortion? I would like to note that this video was published after Dobbs, and what kind of person sees women dying, women suffering, children having to be taken out of state to get health care, rape victims having to carry to term, and thinks, well, women are finally getting their comeuppance, that'll fix them? What is wrong with her?
Due to abortion and birth control, women are now participating in sexual activities that should naturally result in them getting pregnant and giving birth. By removing the consequences of sexual behavior, women are doing things that should make them mothers, but don't. What kind of effect does that have on their psyches? The same could be said about men who should become fathers after having sex with women, but who don't. The difference is, unlike men, having a baby for a woman is a rite of passage into adulthood. Women are making adult decisions without actually being adults psychologically, because they're not going through the phases of maturation that turns a girl into a woman. When girls become mothers, generally speaking, they become less selfish, less self-absorbed, and more caring for the people in their families and society at large, because they care about their children's future. Becoming a mother means making a sacrifice for the greatest bond between two people that can ever be achieved.
Oh, okay. What's wrong with her is that she thinks she has some special knowledge the rest of us don't. I am flabbergasted. Not only that someone thinks that way, but that people are cheering her on in the comments. And this is just misogyny. And if you're wondering what about men, she thinks men have been critiqued enough, and if you think about it, women really hold the power to change society now. And to that, she recommends.
But I think we have to restore the social status of men. We need to restore the responsibility of our society unto men once again. We need to humbly accept our role as women and allow men to lead if we ever hope to live in harmony with them. We need to show them the respect they need to feel like alphas if we want to marry alphas. Unless women do these things, we will continue to live in misery, hopelessly attracted to men who are incapable of being good fathers because they prioritize their own sex drives over anything and everything meaningful in this world. They will chase and discard women. They will abandon their children. But for real change to actually take place, we as women must care enough to change ourselves.
So, yep. Everything wrong with society is women's fault, and women can fix it by letting men take charge again. And no, she doesn't explain how she figures women are the ones in charge. But if I had to guess, it's probably the existence of no-fault divorce and birth control. I don't know who sent this to me, but this was just red pill nonsense. And you can't rationalize with red pill because red pill isn't rational, and there's nothing redeeming about it. And if you find yourself going down that path, I have some resources linked below. And I just want to say, feminism isn't a replacement for a personality, nor is it a get-out-of-jail-free card for selfish behavior. If you are a horrible person, that's because you're a horrible person. And that was it for this video. Please feel free to leave your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next one.